Clearly, the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago has sent shockwaves across America. One of the central questions being asked whether this was a legitimate action being taken by the FBI. This is a clip from a recent interview with former acting director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, talking about this issue.
Is that it's a broad-based attack against FBI people, or a threat of an attack against FBI people writ large. And it is being prompted by what they did in the search at Mar-a-Lago, which is the type of work FBI people do every day. That is executing search warrants in a lawful, court-monitored way under the supervision of their own leadership in the Department of Justice. This is the meat and potatoes work that the FBI does, and now they've all become targets for doing that work.
What he seems to be suggesting here, Lee, is that this is just a standard operation of the FBI. This isn't some kind of abuse or some kind of targeted action. This is just what they do on a regular basis.
Well, certainly over the last 6 years, this has become standard operating procedure, how the FBI and other domestic intelligence services have targeted Donald Trump, the Donald Trump circle, and of course, with January 6th, Donald Trump supporters. This has become standard practice. But once we pull it back a little bit and look at the broad sweep of American history, we have a much clearer sense that this is not normal at all. So the question is, how did we get here? And where is it going? Let's dig into some details right now.
I'm Brendan Fallon.
And I'm Lee Smith. And we're over the target.
Just looking at some recent polls here from Trafalgar Group, Lee, it seems to be the case that there are many people, there's a large swath of the American population that is very concerned about what's happening. 83% of Republicans, 72% of independents have indicated in this poll that they're more likely to vote now in the midterms because of what they've seen happening with this FBI raid at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, thank goodness. It means that a lot of Americans out there are, with the independents, it shows it's not just Donald Trump supporters or Donald Trump voters. It shows that a lot of Americans are actually contesting what Andrew McCabe is saying, that a lot of Americans don't believe it's normal for the FBI, for our federal law enforcement authorities to be doing such things. And that's because a lot of people have been watching this for the last 6 years. And of course, Andrew McCabe is in the middle of it.
When you say 6 years, what else has happened that would suggest some kind of trajectory here?
Yeah, well, Russiagate is the first one, and that's very important. Again, Andrew McCabe is in the middle of it. He was first deputy director of the FBI, and then he was the acting director of the FBI, and he's running this inside the FBI operation to target Donald Trump. Remember, he's part of this discussion about whether or not McCabe or Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is going to wear a wire against President Trump. So again, these are the things that have been normalized. Russiagate covers a lot of ground, a lot of territory. But just the fact that these things were becoming normalized at the time, wearing a wire to go in and meet with the President of the United States, that's part of the trail showing us how we got to this place where we are now.
I know this didn't just start with Russiagate. I understand that powers of the FBI were really broadened significantly in terms of surveillance in the wake of 9/11. Understandably, people were very concerned about this terrible terrorist attack on New York, and this kind of opened the window for the powers of the FBI to be really expanded at that stage. Is that where it started? Is that where you see the beginning of what we're getting now, of what were the kind of violations by the FBI that we're seeing now?
Well, that was certainly a transition point because with 9/11, as you say, the FBI transitioned from being strictly a law enforcement organization going after organized crime, right? Bad guys. This is the history of the FBI. Elliot Ness, going after mobsters, going after rum runners and drug runners, right? But even then, of course, there were problems. And everyone knows that J. Edgar Hoover collected files and intelligence on his political opponents here in the United States. But that really was a decisive moment, Brendan. You're absolutely right. With 9/11, what happened was that the FBI then became part of the intelligence community. And what that meant was they were right in the middle of Washington, D.C., fighting for their budgets and fighting for more power. And if you were a politician on either side of the aisle after 9/11, and if you weren't interested in helping out the FBI that was going to catch terrorists who were threatening Americans on our own soil, you were in the wrong. You needed to be working with the FBI. So that right there increased their prestige as well as their budgets.
This is certainly a disturbing development you're describing, Lee, where an organization that's responsible for surveillance, for enforcement, finds itself in D.C. and has so much political sway. And if there are any doubts about the situation, I think Chuck Schumer put this to rest some years ago with these comments that he made.
He's taking these shots, this antagonism, this taunting to the intelligence community.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
What do you think the intelligence community would do if they were motivated?
I don't know, but from what I am told, they are very upset with how he has treated them and talked about them.
And I think the most alarming thing about this comment is the fact that this is the accepted status quo, that someone like a president should be afraid, a former president should be afraid of the power of the FBI.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that shows how far it had gone even at that point. And that was right after Donald Trump was elected. And usually those remarks are interpreted as to say, boy, you certainly don't want to tangle with the FBI. That's a really dopey move. No one in Washington would do that. But when really the way to understand those remarks is if Washington policymakers saying that, that tells you how far everything is spun out of control. The FBI and intelligence services are supposed to work for Americans. They don't have to keep us safe, to advance our interests. They don't have their own mandates to go after their political opponents. But that's what Chuck Schumer was exactly describing.
What you just described, Lee, it brings to mind this term that's getting thrown around a lot recently, is this idea that America is becoming like a banana republic. One of the things that's distinguished America or set it apart is the kind of protections that are in place to prevent an organization like the FBI from gaining this kind of power. And surely there's been opposition to this. There's been some kind of move to prevent this happening in the course of history.
There were journalists, people like Glenn Greenwald. There were libertarians, there were civil liberties lawyers who were saying, you're going down the wrong path with the Patriot Act. You're going down the wrong act with this warrantless surveillance. This is going to lead to problems. And indeed, they were correct. And the people who were arguing against them, I know because I was among them, were arguing against them were people who were law and order people saying, no, the FBI, the CIA wouldn't dream of doing bad things to Americans. They're here to protect Americans. We all should have had a better grasp, not just of our intelligence services, but a better grasp of human nature and what power looks like in the wild. And this is what we've seen unfold and grow over the last several years.
We've seen a string of actions by the FBI, and the idea that the FBI would actually go to Trump's home, there's a symbolism in that. Along with the arrest of Peter Navarro, putting him in handcuffs publicly, you're almost forced to question whether there isn't some intended purpose in this kind of symbolism.
There's not just a political effect, there's also a moral, spiritual, and psychological effect, right? When security services are running different parts of your country, we can tell ourselves that it's stabilizing the country and enhancing our peace and prosperity, but we now see that's not the case. What happens instead is, as we just talked about, it's rather augmenting the sense of anxiety, the panic. And this is one of the things that we see with the raid on Mar-a-Lago, right? It's not just serving political ends. When they convict Steve Bannon, when they put, as you said, Peter Navarro in handcuffs, when they raid the home of the former president of the United States, and a likely presidential candidate for 2024, this adds to the anxiety. That's intentional. It's not a mistake. So when Andrew McCabe is saying these things are normal, Americans know these things are not normal. And that's why people get more and more worried about the future of the country, and the future not just of the country, but the future of their families, the future of their communities, their own futures. How do we conduct our daily business? How do we conduct our daily lives if this is where the country is being pushed towards this sort of complexity, right? This sort of instability. This is not good for any society.
And we know that the media has played a central role in this campaign to neutralize Trump as a political opponent. How do you see this playing out now in the recent context? If you're watching on YouTube, you can find the full version of Over the Target on Epoch TV, where you don't have to worry about being censored or cancelled for covering sensitive content.
jump on over and watch us on Epoch TV, where you'll find not only Over the Target, but all your favorite great Epoch TV shows like The Wide Angle with Brendan Fallon.